Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Not That Bad Live. We are live. We are talking movies. We are doing what we do best, I guess. Maybe worst. I don't know. Maybe a mix of both. I am one of your regular co-hosts. My name is Connor, aka porn parody character Meat Thin. Yeah, no, you get it. And I'm joined by my illustrious co-host, Mr. Gabe Tice. Gabe, formulaic intro out of the way. How you doing this evening?
I need to get out of here. This is already off the rails.
Oh
my God. Oh, let's just get this over with. Yeah.
We'll just plow through this, man. I think we both need a drink and some sleep, so let's.
Yeah, right.
Do this.
Should we tell people actually about the Not That Bad drinking game?
I think so. I think, I don't have a drink this evening. Normally I do nurse a drink during the episode, but anybody at home, we got some things that we pick up on that we do pretty regularly on this show.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think the
I
drink
say
nurse
my
is me.
wife, let's see. What's some other ones you got? I like to say it's funny a lot. Interesting. It's interesting. What kind of cues can we look for from you in this drinking game?
Well, I recently got married, so I'm a my wife guy too. Yeah, I mean, if we say it back to back, you got to take like a highball or something, or like some kind of crazy concoction.
I think the universe will explode if that happens. So hopefully we can keep that to a minimum during this episode, which we're talking about a movie in, of course. That's what this show's all about. What are we talking about today, man?
Well, for anybody who can't read the title, we're talking about
it's everywhere right now.
Yeah. We're just gotta be a dick about it for no reason.
Yeah, we're just gonna be an asshole the rest of the episode.
Yeah, okay. So we're talking about a movie that we should have talked about like months ago because there was a new addition to the franchise we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But I was in Europe, and God forbid that we actually be topical for once in our careers. So now we're finally talking about Mission Impossible 2. Yes, that is MI2, MI the Second, largely considered to be the worst film in the otherwise acclaimed Mission Impossible franchise.
It's funny. Drink it
already.
I had to throw that. I had to just throw them a bone to start this off. But I do think it's kind of cool to look back on this movie, but it's also strange in a way because this was the biggest movie of 2000, like the biggest movie. It made the most money. It got the most attention for the right and wrong reasons. Directed by John Woo, famous Hong Kong director. 56% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 2.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd. By far the lowest rated of the franchise. I know, we're going to, keep it light. We're going to talk about it as we go. But do you have a history at all with this movie or like the Mission Impossible franchise? Like, what do you think of these fucking things?
I have a history of thinking that all of these movies kick ass. These movies have kicked ass since 1996, and they have not stopped, not for a second. That's why we're talking about this movie on our show, because I just adore this franchise as a whole. And this one probably benefits from that association somewhat. But this is also a really weird outlier in the franchise, and I love it for its black sheep energy. But more importantly, I have a history with John Woo, to be sure. Ooh. When I was 12, man, like that was a real father and son movie. Was Hard Boiled, directed by John Woo. Just a very formative, big boy kind of movie. It was like baby's first R-rated movie or something like that.
Very fair.
So I had that experience with John Woo, and for some reason, the experience didn't really evolve into me seeing his other movies. For some reason, I kind of stopped at Hard Boiled until I saw Mission Impossible 2. He had come to Hollywood had made some movies that were not as critically well received as his, original stuff that he was doing in Hong Kong. But we arrived to Mission Impossible 2, which is the biggest movie of his career, just in terms of box office, just in terms of star power, just in terms of, him getting his brand out there. And thankfully, I think that has trickled down, in the well-tested theory of trickle-down economics, that has trickled down into people seeing his other work. It has probably brought more attention to his Hong Kong career and some of his more underrated American movies like Face Off. But Mission Impossible 2 has two huge things going for it. Like, just right off the bat, it's a Mission Impossible movie and it's a John Woo movie. And both of those things are well represented, I think, in this movie.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to see how John Woo this is without being there's so many parts of it that aren't John Woo, but the parts that are John Woo are so fucking John Woo that it's unmistakable. If it were somebody ripping him off, it would be the most blatant ripoff in the history of all ripoffs. From the doves to the to the unnecessary explosions, unnecessary in a way in story context, but completely necessary for my enjoyment. I guess I kind of want to start us off there with the action of this movie. It's a complaint amongst the audience that it takes too long to get into the action. We'll get into that, I guess, as we go. But I think this movie kicks fucking ass, dude. This movie kicks ass, kicks dicks, and asks no other questions. Did you get the same experience the last time that you rewatched this?
From Mission Impossible 2? Yeah. Look, this is a movie where Tom Cruise, who's sporting just this beautiful, flowing mane of hair.
Controversial mane of hair.
By people who are not comfortable with their sexualities, for sure. Okay. Let's get that out of the way.
Oh,
no,
boy.
But this is a movie where Tom Cruise, he can only, he plays chicken with this the bad guy on a motorcycle. They race towards each other, and in a move that only John Woo would have the confidence to try to pull off, they jump off of their motorcycles and they slam into each other in the air. And like, not a broken bone. There's a whole 10-minute hand-to-hand combat sequence that follows from that physics-defying stunt. Now, it is true that action is backloaded in this movie. I didn't count. I didn't like take a mental note of this, but I'm sure it's like an hour has passed at least before the first shootout, which is so funny because a lot of people call this a dumbed down movie. They say that it misses the point of the other Mission Impossible movies, the whole franchise, that it's now all about the action. It's trying to rip off James Bond. It's trying to do Mission Impossible Extreme. But no, when you look at the actual ratio of action to screen time, it's actually more story oriented, more story focused than Mission Impossible 3, which is a fan favorite. And I'm not going to say which one I prefer, but that juxtaposition is pretty interesting. I think John Woo's name and his style, the fact that he indulges in his style so flagrantly, I think gives people the idea that this movie is more action oriented than it is, when it's really a love triangle. And it's not a bad one. We're going to have to get into that because that's a big problem that people have with this movie. Because I think this is the only Mission Impossible movie to really focus on an on-screen romance with Tom Cruise's character Ethan Hunt. Whereas all the other ones, if he does have a romantic relationship, it's not the focus, and it's usually something that's developed off screen. Like by Mission Impossible 3, he's gotten married, his relationship is established. Here we have Ethan Hunt on the prowl. Okay, he's on the hunt for this woman, this master thief, who gets involved with this sort of takedown of a rogue Mission Impossible agent who has stolen. Yeah, look, I'm not going to pretend like I give a shit about the plot. Like we do have to get that out of the way. We have to. I mean, tell me if you agree with me. I can literally not remember the name of the virus, the name of the villain, the name of the villain's henchman. All I remember is that there's a lot of Scots and a lot of South Africans and a lot of Australians populating this rogues cast.
Um, it's called Chimera, by the way. I actually do enjoy the plot to this. Believe it or not, I think it's a good change of direction from the first movie, which, like, to this day, I think there are still people who are that kind of feel that the first movie is a little bit convoluted. I did read some reviews that said that they almost appreciated the fact that, and they did use the term "dumbed down" for the story and for the premise and for all of that, but I think it helps strengthen this movie because so many people complain about the action coming too late and all that stuff. But I was engaged what was happening throughout the movie. Like, it kept me watching, It kept me into it. And by the time we got to the action, I was like, all right, now we're going to start kicking ass. And they did not take their foot off the accelerator. Not once.
Let me clarify. When I say I don't care about the plot, I mean I don't care about the mechanics of the plot. I don't care about the MacGuffin.
That's fair.
But I am engaged with the movie. I'm with the movie because of the, let's say, emotional beats that the plot engenders. It's very similar to this Alfred Hitchcock movie, Notorious, that's also about a woman who is co-opted by the government, like some intelligence agency, to help track down an arms dealer who's smuggling in uranium, and she, of course, pretends to be in love with him. It's actually almost beat for beat that plot, but it's sexier, it's more dynamic. It trades in subtlety and suspense for pyrotechnics and GQ model-esque beauty and photogenic faces. I mean, Tom Cruise has not an ounce of sexual energy, and yet he is probably scientifically the sexiest looking man on the planet. It's a really weird dynamic, and that's always something that's fascinated me about the guy. Have we ever talked about a Tom Cruise movie? Have we talked about TC on this?
No,
program?
I mean, he's come up during the course of the show, I'm sure. I mean, how could he not have ever come up on this show? But I don't believe we've ever talked about a movie that stars or features Tom Cruise.
To be fair, he has a really solid track record. Earlier in the 80s, he had some duds, he had some bombs. And we're talking about one of the few major Tom Cruise releases, I think, that qualifies for this show, which is a testament to how careful and methodical he is with his career and how good of a track record he has. But should we just touch on Tom Cruise, because he is the driving force of this movie and this franchise.
Yeah.
He might be the reason we still have movie theaters, to the extent that we do have them. Although I think you could argue that claim is a little overstated. He's the man who saved movie theaters, right? But that is a reputation that, embellished or not, stays with him. And he is he's a member of a criminal organization, something that does not get brought up anymore. It used to plague him back in the day. Like, can we touch on the fact that he's had a real, not just a career resurgence, but just like a personality resurgence? Like, people like him again. Back in the 2000s, people thought, rightly so, that he was weird.
Right.
Like, they were still seeing his movies, and they acknowledged he was a great actor, 3-time Academy Award nominee, but he was a bizarre person. Very off-putting. You had the Oprah jumping on the couch. You had his little exchange with that Matt Lauer guy, where he, professed to know the history of psychiatry, unlike all these snobby journalists that he was talking to. I mean, just like a bunch of minor episodes that were all happening around the time that he marries Katie Holmes. divorces Nicole Kidman. Just like a bad time to be Tom Cruise's PR guy. Like, do you remember that time? And do you remember watching him like rise above that to become, the celebrated movie star he is right now?
Well, I certainly remember the second thing you said there, the latter, I suppose, because it's been very recent. I feel like over the last maybe 5-6 years is really just been kind of like this slow build. I think up until Mission Impossible Fallout came out, I think when that movie came out is when the tide really started to turn, and then Top Gun came out, and it just like completely changed everybody's thoughts on the guy. And I think honestly that was a natural progression for him. I think when you're young, you just joined a cult, you're getting ready to change your life up. It can do a lot to you, and I don't want to speculate about what was going on in his life or what place he was in to do any of this, but I think.
Oh, I do. I love to speculate about that.
I think. Well, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Tom Cruise, despite that, and it's because of two things. One, he was able to kind of rise above this reputation that he had, and so many people talk about the fact that of that organization, he's like the coolest one. He never talks about it unless somebody asks him.
That's really not true.
Honestly, no. Nowadays, he really does not talk about it.
Oh, nowadays, no. That's because somebody told him, like, Tom, gotta cool it. The backdrop that I have is from an interview where he claimed that Scientology can save you from car crashes.
Don't get me wrong. Back then, I know everything that the guy did was either Scientology or being excited about being married to Katie Holmes. I get that. But as he went along, I think that's what started to turn people for him. When somebody's not all up in your face about something, you start to either forget about it or it starts to become something that doesn't bug you as much. And for me, I'm somebody who is part of that camp. Like I was full on, I was there when South Park made that episode, man. I was digging in on Scientology as much as anybody. And I still would to a certain extent. So I don't really want to get sued by him. But Leah Remini's doing enough, I think.
Well, I can't make fun of Scientology anymore because it's actually a rule of Hollywood that you have to sign up. So I can't really bash them. They've been really wonderful for my career.
Hey, Xenu does.
Oh man, do I wish that were true?
Do I wish? But first off, I do want to acknowledge. Gabe. No, yes, other Gabe is here.
In the chat.
Thanks for coming in, other Gabe. And I don't know if you're still here, Austin from SPC Unleashed, saying congrats, Gabe, on getting married. Actually, both of them mentioning it. Thank you. Congrats on the wife. I think that comes from all of us here.
My wife,
your wife, but. I want to use this opportunity when we're talking about Tom Cruise, not just to talk about his hair, which was in every fucking review that I read. Thanks, Austin. That was nice to see you here. Still here. But I want to talk about the rest of the cast real quick because I don't think people talk about it enough because not a lot of these people went on to be as big as I think they looked like they were going to be back then. Especially our
Anthony Hopkins character.
Yeah, that fellow who's not even credited in this movie, by the way. Fun fact about
him. He doesn't need to be credited.
Fun fact about him, that was actually offered first to Ian McKellen, who turned it down. He ended up having to not do it because of the schedule. If he did film this movie, despite the short time he would have been needed, he would have missed the Lord of the Rings that he was filming and X-Men. So he in either of those. But speaking of X-Men,
yes, can I mention this? Yeah,
take it.
Our lead villain, the actor was supposed to play the part of Logan / Wolverine in the first X-Men movie, but lost that part after an injury that I think he sustained from this. Oh, I am getting a call, and this is what happens when you do things live. So take it away, Connor. I'm so sorry.
Unprofessional. No, I'm joking. By the way, yes, other Gabe, I will be with you on that. I think when he did Les Grossman in Tropic Thunder, that definitely was part of the turnaround for me. I don't know if you remember this too, but he also around that time appeared on like the MTV Movie Awards or something. It might have been, and did a song with J-Lo as Les Grossman, which was pretty cool. But Yes, Dougray Scott was supposed to be Wolverine, but sustained an injury doing this movie in a motorcycle accident. And it wasn't like anything major, but it did prevent them from doing some of the reshoots they needed to do. And so he was actually cast as Wolverine. He had to pull out, and I don't know, some stage actor from Australia or something was the one who took over that role. I don't know, Jack Human. I don't know what his name is. But in all seriousness, it is kind of cool to see this actor who was supposed to be he was supposed to go on to play a very prominent role and ended up not doing so. And since Gabe's not back from his phone call, I'll just continue to kind of talk about things in this movie and hopefully not have any tech issues. That would be very unfortunate. While Gabe is not here, the stream will go dead. So fingers crossed that that does not happen. But there's a lot to look into for this movie, and I think it's one of those movies that it was always going to be ostracized because of how different it was from the first movie. But the fact that every movie since then has gone away from it has been really interesting. No movie in the franchise has ever done what this movie has done so far. Which I don't know, if you ask me, that's unfortunate. Nobody's gone back to the John Woo style. He's the only director in the franchise that was not asked to return, which it's just unfortunate. I feel like it's kind of insulting to this massive Hong Kong director who had this very prolific career beforehand. But nevertheless, very interesting indeed. Gabe, how much of that did you
I'm
hear?
so sorry. I am wearing Bluetooth headphones, so I actually heard all of it.
Oh, cool.
And I'd say, if this is what you're like when I'm not around, then thank God that this is a two-person show. You know what
I was so glad. I was so glad when I saw that camera come back on. I was like, oh, thank God. Oh, thank God.
Oh, my God. You're talking about why John Woo did not return. And
he was the only director of all of them that was not invited back.
He's the only director of this franchise to not be invited back because he clashed with Tom Cruise. He clashed with him quite a bit. The edit that John Woo delivered was like 3 hours long.
Yeah, 3.5
not
hours.
Permissible. 3.5 hours. Awesome.
Yeah.
Really can't imagine what that version of the movie looks like, because it's not like you see these massive holes in the story or the beats.
Right.
Maybe they cut out some action sequences that were earlier in the movie, and that's why the movie does feel backloaded. That's speculation, though. I don't think we're ever going to see the John Woo cut, right?
Release the Woo cut
of Mission Impossible 2. I don't think Tom Cruise would ever allow that to happen. And by the way, Tom Cruise is the producer on these movies too. Yes. So it's not just the typical thing of a star being a diva. Like, he had a vested interest in the production here. Like, he had the levers of power, and he didn't like working with John Woo. I mean, I'm sure they respected each other, and I think they were both excited to work with each other. But unfortunately, because of this movie, John Woo's reputation just took this big hit and his stock went down, which is crazy because this movie was a massive commercial success. Massive. Was it like top 3 highest grossing movies of the year?
It was the number 1 of the year.
The number 1.
Yes. So it was the biggest movie of 2000.
I think this movie also might have demoralized John Woo from that perspective. You know, here is his biggest movie in terms of box office gross, and he was more hamstrung than when he was making his action films in Hong Kong, and probably when he's making stuff like Broken Arrow or a Hard Target or Face Off. I know a lot of people love Face Off.
Yeah. I mean, well, one of the things I read in reviews a lot was that people felt like it was either John Woo phoning it in or it was John Woo light. And so they sort of felt like, in a way, he had sold out to a big studio to do this big movie and not deliver the best of what he could do. I don't know if I agree with that 100%, because I think the action sequences that we do get are very John Woo, from the way that they're shot to the way that the choreography to everything felt like a John Woo movie. But maybe people were just expecting that like nonstop double gun shootout with brutality and blood and violence and everywhere. But I don't know. That's not really what I expected out of this thing. I didn't. Now, I was a little surprised, especially watching it back, because I actually grew up on this movie. I watched a lot as a kid. Rewatching it for the show, I was a little bit surprised at how much I agreed with the review saying that it was a little bit more James Bond than Mission Impossible. But I don't necessarily think that that was a terrible thing at this time, because like the Mission Impossible franchise was one movie. You know, people pretend like, oh, it doesn't fit with any of the other ones. Well, that's because the first one was a certain way. The second one did something different. And then they went back to the formula that worked.
Well, I mean, not even that. When you look at Mission Impossible 3 or 4, 5 or 6, they have paid respects to that original Brian De Palma classic.
Yes.
But it's not a carbon copy. I mean, that's something I actually love about these movies from 1 to 5, is they are very distinct tonally and stylistically. Basically, they would bring in a visionary director of their own distinct style, method of film, and give them a huge budget and ask them to deliver a Mission Impossible movie. And this movie kind of cemented that in a way where you go from this, again, suspenseful movie racked with paranoia, more like a caper. I'm talking about the first Mission Impossible, because it was made by Brian De Palma. That was his MO. Right. And then somebody said, hey, what if we went in this completely different direction by giving the wheel to somebody like John Woo? And even though this movie is not considered, the proudest, like the finest hour of the Mission Impossible series, and I think a lot of people are happy that this direction did not continue, this movie was that kind of first attempt in this experiment of how to approach the Mission Impossible movies. So this movie's success did ensure that, even if obviously people have rejected this movie's specific style or specific approach.
Yeah, and one other thing that I think doesn't help that, and I don't know if this is a negative or a positive for you, but they infuse a lot of the time shit in this movie. I mean, you have the sunglasses and black leather. You have, at one point, Dougray Scott's character has a full denim suit. Like, I don't mean like a Canadian tuxedo here. I mean like a quite literally a suit made all of denim. I'm pretty sure he has a denim tie, a denim shirt underneath a denim jacket.
He just come back from auditioning to play Wolverine, and that's,
I don't know if Wolverine, if they ever put him in a denim tux, that'll be the greatest thing I ever see in my life. And I hope they do. But for now, we have him in this movie. But it goes beyond just wardrobe, right? Like, let's not forget Limp Bizkit did the version of the theme for this movie.
Well, John Woo is just such a huge Limp Bizkit fan. He wouldn't do the movie if they didn't get a feature on the soundtrack.
Oh, man, what a deal!
No,
I'm sure Limp Bizkit loved that, but
it's a movie that is a product of its time more than 100%. Any other film in the franchise, and that's partly why people say it ages like milk. It's a double-sided thing. You and I have talked about this.
Yes,
it can either mean that it ages like milk, or it's a time capsule for your childhood. We were 2 when this movie came out, and I think it does represent my very earliest memories of popular culture.
Yeah.
Not that automatically makes it good, but it might give it a charm for us, as opposed to somebody who was, was already like an adult when this movie came out and had to sit through the cringe fest of Woodstock 99 or other unfortunate episodes like that. So I get that how, again, it's a double-edged sword. There's nothing objective about it other than, whether or not it was wise to plant the flag in the popular culture of then. But I don't think it bothers either of us. It made me laugh a couple times. I mean, I know we talked about Tom Cruise, but I don't think we fully addressed the whole character that he is given. The transition from his character in the first movie to this is like, it's not even a transition. He is playing a different character. There's nothing in this horny, adrenaline junkie, James Bond wannabe that was there in the first movie or in the movies that followed. Now, some people have come up with these fan theories about why Ethan Hunt is so different here. Some people think that the PTSD he suffered from the first movie has, this has turned him into this. This is his kind of like relapse from that. But if you take it as a Hong Kong / American response to James Bond, then it becomes kind of cool. And I think this movie eclipses most of the James Bond movies, except for the very best. I'll go, dude. James Bond. How do we have only 7 Mission Impossible movies, but 45 James Bond movies? Like, where is the justice in that ratio?
Okay, this is where we're going to clash a little bit. I grew up a super fan of James Bond. I loved all of the movies, all of them, even the Timothy Dalton ones. I loved them. And
dude, the Timothy Dalton ones are one of the better ones.
So my favorite Bond is Pierce Brosnan. I even like his worst ones. In fact, the one that my introduction to the Bond franchise was The World Is Not Enough, which is very much eligible for this show and very much a movie I am considering. But I don't have, when people say that this is a James Bond clone, I don't necessarily disagree with them. I think this is the character of Ethan Hunt in the movie is very much closer to what you'd see in a James Bond movie. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Not for me. I'm a James Bond fan. And even though Ethan Hunt was a very different character in the first movie, I like what we're given here. Maybe he's trying something new. You ever tried something new with your personality? Yeah, everybody's done it at some point.
He was going through a phase that a lot of men in the late 90s and early 2000s were, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, new metal was the craze. He picked up Linkin Park's first CD and loved it.
I mean, clearly Limp Bizkit fan. Clearly friends with Fred Durst,
Was that Limp Bizkit CD before or after Limp Bizkit? Like who did it first? Who came first?
The Linkin Park CD?
I
think Limp Bizkit CD. Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavor Water was 2000. So was Linkin Park, did that come out in 2000 as well? Or was that, I don't know. I don't know enough about music to get into this conversation. I do want to shout out Austin's comment. Underrated Tom Cruise film, War of the Worlds. He says, "Oh, that's your favorite Cruise film and second favorite Spielberg film."
I condone that. It's not my favorite, but I have felt that movie was actually underrated for quite some time. And because we're looping back to an earlier discussion, that movie's reputation was hurt by Tom Cruise's antics of the time. It was in promoting War of the Worlds that he got into that spat with Matt Lauer. And I think that's around the time that he was doing his other kind of weird stuff that we were talking about.
My wife has stopped by and has said the only Tom Cruise movie I've seen is Legend, which is true.
That is random as shit.
So
that is so random. I love it.
Believe it or not, I asked her to watch Mission Impossible 2 with me because I think it's so cheesy and I think she would love it. And she straight up told me, no, I like that the only Tom Cruise movie I've seen is Legend. And people's reaction is too good for me to watch it with you. And I understood. I did. That's the only one she's seen. And I'm certain that will be the case until she dies. Although I am trying to convince her that adding, I've also seen the worst Mission Impossible movie is a good thing. But nevertheless, here we go. And it's going to stay that way. All right. I had to know that was coming. Anyways, well,
just airing out the dirty laundry.
Yeah,
this is what you do live streams for. Okay, we need more drama. We have not gone into nearly enough drama on this.
Of course, Kaylee. If you're still in here, let's just have a full-on argument. Let's just start fighting. I'll yell for like the first time in a while. No, but in all seriousness, that's another thing I say a lot. Take a drink if you hear me say that shit again. Let's talk about something that does date this movie, but also has a very different side to it. It's the score of this movie. Part of it, I believe, was Hans Zimmer, and the other side is Limp Bizkit and new metal bands of the early 2000s. first question I have for you is, do you like the score and soundtrack for this movie? And the other side of that is, do you think it holds up at all in a charming way for you? Not necessarily for everybody else. I know it doesn't for everybody else.
I think half of it holds up well, because one half of it is one of our great musicians, and the other is Hans Zimmer.
Shit. Oh,
honestly, I did not even mentally know 90% of the soundtrack. I mean, like, I'm not going to say it was the sound of my childhood, but I was exposed to this at a young age. It's like being exposed to a disease and then building immunity to it. This movie was like the Johnson and Johnson of new metal. So
oh my God.
I was pretty comfortable with it. I can make jokes, I can take shots, but come on, man. Anybody who's like really like, you know, dogging this movie because of the soundtrack, like the first Spider-Man movie, a classic, if there ever was one, has amazing. It not only has a Chad Kroeger song, right?
I mean, I knew this was going to come up in soundtrack talk. I just knew it.
The middle of the movie, the introduction of the Green Goblin is at a Macy Gray concert. So let's just be fair. Let's be measured in our critiques here. Who honestly gives a shit about the soundtrack as poorly aged as it is?
I give a shit because it's awesome, and I will be told nothing else. Real behind the scenes fact, I tried to license that song for this episode with Universal Music Group, but they are insanely intricate with how they license their music, and I couldn't get it done. But I tried to license Limp Bizkit for this podcast because I love the show so much. I would have paid an unreasonable amount of money for that. That being said,
this you mean was any money?
Oh yes. However, this music and this time period, I talk about it every time we talk about a movie from this time period. It always makes me feel good. So does that music, man. Is Fred Durst's voice just the most ridiculous shit you've ever heard? Abso-fucking-lutely. Who sings like that? Who does that? But that music just hits a spot in my heart and soul. And so as soon as I heard it kick in at the beginning of this movie, which, by the way, they don't play the full song until the last song in the credits. It tail ends the credits of this movie, other than play the riff. So Fred Durst's voice is not officially a part of this film. That said, I think it kicks ass. I think both sides of it kick ass. The soundtrack does. What Hans Zimmer gave us was incredible. I think he is legitimately one of the defining composers of all time when it comes to film, in my opinion. So,
yeah, Hans has had some backlash.
Yes,
in the years since his peak, and I understand it because, like Danny Elfman, there hasn't been great quality control on his latter body of work. But come on, like from this to The Dark Knight, the man was dropping bops,
heat, fire. More fire than this movie has. He was dropping it. It was pretty insane. I want to throw to something. I want to introduce a topic, if I may.
I guess it's your show now, huh?
Yes.
You get to do whatever you want.
This is my show. Fuck you. This is my show now. One thing I want to ask about is
I'm the captain now.
I want to ask about I want to introduce a complaint that the audience has, because there's a couple of parts to it, and I want us to kind of break it down and talk about our feelings on it. I want to start with your opinion on it, but people say that this movie has too much. What I mean by too much is it has too much of a lot of things that people apparently don't want to see in their action movies. It has too much slow-mo. It has too many unmasking scenes. It has too many zooms, too many doves. What is your thought on this? Is this movie, does it overdo things? Does it
Is it
try too hard?
excessive?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's excessive.
Is it excessive in a bad way?
Is that a crime? Is caring too much a crime? That's the question. Is caring too much about your art a crime? Let's kind of take it piece by piece. Unmaskings, you are right. The audience is right. The sad thing is,
I think there's a couple too many.
The abundance of maskings probably dilutes the effect of one of the coolest scenes of the movie. I don't know if you'll agree with me on that, but for me, one of the cooler scenes, one of the scenes that actually utilizes the Mission Impossible premise the best, is when Ethan Hunt tricks our Scottish baddie into killing his own henchman.
I think that's one of the best scenes of this movie. By the way, apparently that henchman was supposed to be South African. That accent was all over the place.
Did you recognize that guy? Did you recognize the henchman?
Yes. I do. I remember his name right now? No, but he's been in a couple of things I believe that I enjoy. In fact, let me pull up his letterbox.
He's been in a couple of things we've talked about on this program, and you had called him out previously. Last time we talked about this guy. Yeah, he was Dracula in Van Helsing.
I did call him out. You're right, because I didn't like him at all in that movie. Yeah, we have talked about him a few times. I think just in general, definitely talked about his movies. I know in the Van Helsing episode, I believe it was, we discussed League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which he's also in. And of course, now it comes around to Mission Impossible 2. Guy's still working in big movies. He's been in a ton of big movies. Good for him. I think he does well in this movie. I just think his accent is all over the fucking place.
I don't look. South African is a hard accent. It's hard. I don't even know what that accent sounds like. I mean, that's a plot point of Mission Impossible 2, of Lethal Weapon 2, that Merton Riggs don't even know the nationality of the bad guys they're fighting, because nobody knows what a South African accent really sounds like.
Yeah, without Matt Damon, I wouldn't know myself, because Matt Damon was in that Nelson Mandela movie. It's the only reason I know. But
wow.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. Is it like 2010? Like that's your point of reference for South African culture?
All I got. Fuck, I'm not going to Cape Town. Fuck that. All I need to watch is that Nelson Mandela movie. I'll be fine. Now, so is that your favorite scene of the movie, or do you just think that utilizes the unmasking the best? Because I think it kind of could be an argument for both.
I think there are two components of this movie that are trying to work together: the espionage side and the action gun fu side. And that is the best scene of the espionage side. And after that, we have nonstop action until the end credits, really. And obviously, that's what John Woo does best. That's what we're here for. Anybody who was excited that John Woo was directing this is finally going to get their fix by the last, 20 minutes of this movie. But, those masks were introduced in the first Mission Possible. It was nice to see them brought back in a really clever way. Again, did it rip off Darkman? Yeah. Do I think more movies should aspire to be like Darkman? I think it should be a law. I think there's Congress needs to act now. As polarized of a nation as we are, can we not agree on this one simple thing?
I'll write a letter to Mitch McConnell for
you. Before I just go off, why don't you take it back from me? Look, the movie is excessive. The movie is indulgent. I think we sort of wanted that, though. It's so weird to hear people say that this is like watered down John Woo, and to also hear that it's like indulgent. I agree, it's not him at his best. This isn't him in his finest form, but he is like the star of the movie to me, even more than Tom Cruise.
I think I would agree that I think they're equal parts important to this movie, because I actually really like Tom Cruise. And fun fact, this is one of my favorite Tom Cruise performances in anything. I love him in this.
Performances. That's an interesting thing.
I know.
We're definitely going to get into.
Oh yeah. I think this movie can be excessive. I think sometimes it's to the detriment of the movie. I do think there are a few moments where it does take me out just a little bit for suspension of disbelief. I think this is not the only John Woo film to do that. And I'm not going to count it real hard against this movie. It is one of my cons because I really had to nitpick for this one, to be honest with you. I didn't hate a lot about this. And so I do think it's excessive. I think most of it, though, plays into the movie. I don't know how people could complain about this, to be honest. I don't know how people could complain about almost with this movie, because we start with a scene of espionage, right, where they kick it off on the plane after the scientist dude infects himself with Chimera, and he goes up in the sky and he thinks he's with Ethan Hunt, and we think he's with Ethan Hunt, and then it turns out to be the baddie of the movie. I think that was a pretty cool use of the masking technology. I bought it, despite
I love the
a completely silent neck snap. Did you catch that?
I did the opposite of catch it, because there's nothing to catch, because it's silent. I didn't know they made silencers for neck snaps. But what I like about that scene is how well it sets up the dynamic here of hero and villain.
Yeah.
That our villain is trying so hard to be Ethan Hunt because he's been in Ethan Hunt's shadow, to the point where his job is to pretend to be Ethan Hunt when the real Ethan Hunt isn't available. I thought that was a great detail.
Yeah.
And this series, if it has one weakness, one Achilles heel, I think the villains would be that spot. Even in the most acclaimed movie of the franchise, Mission Impossible Fallout, unless you count Henry Cavill, who does turn out to be a villain, the villain of that movie, the mastermind, he's no Goldfinger, right? This villain isn't a star. He's not somebody you would cosplay as, or somebody you would write your own fanfic about, you would want to see a spinoff about. But I like the dynamic we have here. See, people talk about villains, think in too much of a blanket statement kind of way, right? Not every villain is meant to be the Joker or whatever. And we've talked about this on our Punisher episode, Punisher 04, when I defended John Travolta. He is not meant to be intimidating in the traditional sense. What makes him a threat is his desperation to do whatever he needs to do to satisfy his own ego. And in this case, that's unleashing a plague upon the world. And that is something about this movie that's actually aged pretty well, has it not?
Weirdly enough, it has. Yes, strangely well. coming out of the early 2020s here. Honestly, if I'm looking at it from the Bond perspective, right? Because that's, I think, where you get the most comparisons when you really start to break this movie down. You can compare it to the other Mission Impossible movies, but because it does isolate itself a little bit, it's easier to compare it to the Bond films. But I think that's one inspiration that I do kind of dig for this, because this is the most Bond-like villain in my mind. This villain reminds me a little bit of GoldenEye. This villain reminds me of some of the Bond villains that we've seen.
Sean Bean from GoldenEye, yeah.
And GoldenEye is my favorite Bond film. I love it. So I liked being reminded of a movie that I loved. I think there are movies that remind you of better movies. But this just felt like, it was taking inspiration from a series that wasn't necessarily the one that it was, a part of. But I would argue it wasn't really part of one yet. I mean, it was the second movie. When when you make the second movie, it's kind of hard to say that you've established an entire world by now, especially with spies in it, But I like this villain a lot, and I actually liked Tandy Newton in this too as our.
I liked her a lot. She was one of my favorite as our lady. Well, back up.
As our love interest, as our petty thief of the movie.
Don't you mean pretty thief?
Pretty. Oh, you son of a bitch! You did it. That's another drink. Take a drink when Gabe makes that is just bound to get eye rolls in the best way. I said in the best way.
I will take a drink, but not because of that. This is a protest drink.
It's fair. I liked her a lot. Do you think that whole love triangle thing was a tough balance for the tone in this movie? And how do you think her performance complemented or went against that?
I think it's a tough thing for a lot of people going into this movie who are hoping for a John Woo extravaganza. I think we've addressed that previously, but her performance is one of the reasons why that love triangle works. I don't believe that Tom Cruise has the sexuality. I don't believe that he's ever truly enjoyed the touch of a woman, but something about the chemistry that they have between their characters was
so
that
mean.
If that's the driving force of the movie, if that's the heart of the movie, then I think John Woo made a wise choice in casting her, because she honestly felt to me like the star in a way, like the central character, because she's at the most danger, she's the most closely tied to the villain, and I like how much the movie treated her as an autonomous character. I'm not trying to get all like feminist gender studies on people. All right, I know we've been pushing the line with all of our Ben Shapiro jokes lately.
Well,
not all of which is my fault.
Nobody's seen that quite yet. We
I've
made a couple of jokes in the past, but we
Yeah.
got an episode coming out that's got a couple more.
A couple of vicious ones. So
Yeah.
just be on the lookout for that. No, I really enjoyed that she was actually like she wasn't just a tough chick,
Right.
She was a woman put in a dangerous position, and I liked the moral grainness of the movie. I liked, there's a joke that Ethan Hunt always goes rogue. They address it in Mission Impossible 7, but in this movie, he ironically doesn't go rogue, even though this is like IMF is really pushing it.
This is one of the more justifiable reasons to go rogue. They put this. I wouldn't say she's a completely innocent woman, but she's completely uninvolved. It should not have been there, and now she's there, and she is fucked.
She is being used as an object. Is that commentary on anything? I'm not sure, but she is used as a tool in this operation, and the stakes of the operation are high. Obviously, we don't want this evil mastermind type getting his hands on this disease, but for as dumb as this movie supposedly is, like, it raised more actual kind of like moral questions for me than the supposedly smarter movies of the franchise. Like what is the morality of them using this woman, of them kind of like forcing her to go along with this plan? Yes, it's a plan that will save lives if it works, but are we actually going to sign off on that? So very interesting that the dumb movie is the one that raises questions. Like, when people call the other movies here smart, it's because of the construction of the sequences. It's because of the use of suspense. But I'd argue that's not the true measure of intelligence in a movie. If a movie raises questions, legitimate questions, I would wager that makes it just as thought-provoking.
I agree, and I think with her performance in this, it's one of the reasons why I don't really subscribe to or really fully understand the argument that this movie has, that it's a detriment to the film with the like hour or hour plus where we don't really get a lot of hardcore action scenes. We don't really get any action scenes during that hour. And was it a little longer? Yeah, but and I don't want to call this guy out. I'm not like calling him out because I mean I respect him a lot. I'd love to have him on the show at some point. No. I'd love to have this guy on the show.
Drama.
He's got some mutual friends and such. So I'd love to have him on the show. But I was watching the review from Sean Chandler on YouTube, and I saw him mention the fact that when Tandy Newton shoots herself with the Chimera to make sure that the bad guy can't really get his hands on it the same way.
Very cool scene.
Very cool scene. Very impactful scene in the context of the story in the movie. He said that probably should have happened around the 40-minute mark as opposed to the hour mark. But I would argue that it's the best excuse to do it late in the movie and to have action sequences that are exhilarating and nonstop as this movie has it, because we've spent all this time with these characters so far, and we've found this woman who easily could have been a throwaway character or could have had no real thoughts or feelings or emotions other than I'm scared, I need help. but she was more than that, and we got to know her more, and we got to know their relationship more, and we got to see the dynamic more, and
You know,
I cared about the character more when that happened to her. So I don't know that I fully agree with that point. I think where it was actually perfect.
Roasted Sean Chandler.
No.
What's up with it?
You son of a bitch.
No,
I didn't roast anybody.
that's like, I think both sides of this argument are valid. Is the movie does the movie have pacing issues? It's almost objectively so when you know the production history. Like, of course,
Yes.
the movie's going to have this kind of weird pacing about it when you learn about, the post-production history. That being said, I totally agree with you about about using this as the transition to the third act. The stakes have been raised higher than ever. The stakes are more personal than ever. Goddamn, this movie was written by Robert Towne, who some would say wrote the greatest screenplay ever with Chinatown. Greatest screenplay ever in Mission Impossible 2. Don't seem like they'd go together in the same sentence. But even through all of the indulgence and all of the kind of cringy new metal era style, you still see the blueprints of a great script, or at least you see this as being written by somebody who understands what a great screenplay looks like. So you can't just dismiss this movie. You can't just say, "Oh, that's the worst of the franchise." It's like so cringy and stupid. Like, I don't think those are fair. I think there's merit to the movie if you're actually willing to look at it, which is the case to almost all of the movies that we talk about, and that's why we started this whole program.
This movie is what this show is all about, in my opinion. The rating isn't quite as low as I would have liked it to be in order to like really get behind it and defend it, but it's what this show is made for, I think. And there's a lot of reasons that that I think Mission Impossible 2 is basically not that bad. The show, I mean, I'll get into my final verdict a little later when we finish this out, but speaking of that, was there anything else you wanted to introduce from your side as we continue the conversation? I do have one more thing to throw in there, but
yeah. Well, looking at this in the context of the series, I feel like this is where the concept of this series being an excuse for Tom Cruise to try death-defying stunts really comes from. Like, this is where that started. When he is scaling that mountain, that is Tom Cruise scaling a mountain. Yes. He had wires, and yes, I'm not sure if he had a safety net or not, but he had some assistance. Mm-hmm. But that's him.
Yeah,
and that's him. Like, when he does that, when he leaps from one side of the cliff to the other.
Yeah, I think they said that was like a 20-foot jump, which is crazy.
It looks crazy.
Yeah,
it looks crazy. It is a great way to start the movie. It starts it off on the right tone. Yes, is it a little extreme sports? Fine, fair. I don't really care. It's a movie about adrenaline and exhilaration. Great way to start off. And then one of the simplest shots of the movie is one of the most dangerous, that scene where Tom Cruise nearly gets the knife in his eye. That was a real knife that was like a centimeter away from his eyeball.
Yeah, they attached it to a, what was it, like it had a wire on it, and so the wire
on the end
right before it hit his eye.
They measured it exactly. They measured it to the point where it would stop right before his eyeball. I don't know any other major star in Hollywood that would do that. That's like a ridiculous thing. That's something they should not have allowed, frankly.
So it's funny you say that, and take a drink. It is funny that you say that, though, because I want to say it was the first Mission Impossible movie. I don't know for a fact that it was, but there was a movie that Tom Cruise did where he wanted to do his own stunts, and the producers said absolutely not. And so he went and asked somebody, what do I need to do to be able to do whatever I want on these movies? And they were like, well, you'd have to be a producer. So he went, oh, okay. And I think this is the first one that he was a part of producing. And so this kind of started his thrill seeker ways. And that's continued throughout not only this movie, but pretty much every movie he's done.
So he produced the first Mission Impossible, and he did do his own stunts. There wasn't anything as Daredevil, as Evel Knievel in this. But, when he drops from the ceiling in that famous shot, suspended on the wire. That's him. That's
Yeah.
him doing the stunt. When he outruns that aquarium that's blown up,
Yeah.
he's outrunning the water. That's him. So he just keeps upping the ante, and that the trajectory of that was set here. So even though it seems like, again, this is the black sheep of the series, people are embarrassed about this one. People want you to forget about this one. It did start things. It was a precedent that would become really important to the future of this franchise. You can't have the rest of this franchise without it. People would argue that 3 is more of a sequel to the first one, but I feel like you got to test things out. You got to see what works and what doesn't, and you have to allow for experimentation. And I don't know if I should have asked this earlier. Are you like a big fan of these movies, the Mission Impossible movies?
Yes, I have some controversial opinions.
Oh, dude, let's get into it. Let's get into it.
Well, I want to give the final verdict first. I think
the final verdict before we get into the series as a whole.
Oh, fuck it. I'll do it. So it seems like the progression is people really like the first one, right? They really, really like the first one. They don't like,
especially in hindsight.
Yes, yeah. Especially in hindsight. They don't like this one. They kind of like 3, and then they really like every movie that came after it. Like, really like them all. I'm pretty sure none of them have under a 3.5 after Mission Impossible 3, I want to say. I don't know for a fact, but I want to say that's the case on Letterboxd.
It's a good batting average.
Now, I think all the movies are anywhere from good to great. I think, though, where my issues come in is I feel like Ghost Protocol or something?
Ghost Protocol.
And what was the one right? Fallout is after Ghost Protocol and another one. What was the other one in between?
Okay. It goes Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation,
then Rogue Fallout. Nation. Okay. So those 2, as you can tell, are very forgettable to me. I don't understand the amount of love that they get, especially when compared to like Mission Impossible 3 is in the low 3s. It's not super high. People don't absolutely love that movie. People like it, but they don't love it. But they love these 2. And to me, I haven't seen the newest one yet, but Fallout is one of my favorite action movies of all time. Straight up, one of my favorites. I love it.
It's interesting you say that. I've been meaning to have this conversation with somebody. I'm not sure if I get the love for Fallout. As somebody who has a general love for this franchise and I would put Fallout above most action movies coming out in the theaters right now. But I don't know. It pales in comparison to me for 1 through 4. Yeah, I mean, I'm putting in 2 because 2 is more, it has more flair than Fallout. For me, Christopher McQuarrie, he's a goated screenwriter. He wrote The Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
It's hard. Nobody has like a more amazing debut. I don't know if that was literally his debut, but a more kind of like greater entrance to the arena of top tier script writing than a Christopher McQuarrie. And he's just he's a hero to us screenwriters out there. And if I ever met the guy, I would love to buy him a drink.
Yeah.
But his direction leaves me a little cold.
Ooh.
And there's something a little bloated about Fallout to me. I think it's trying to compensate for a lack of substance with the abundance of stunt work, with the abundance of fight scenes, with the abundance of plot. That movie is nearly 3 hours, and I felt the length. I'm a huge fan of Ghost Protocol. I'm interested that you think it's more milquetoast. I mean, to me, I don't think this series has a higher point than when Tommy C is scaling the Taj Mahal. That is what this franchise has been chasing that scene ever since.
I won't necessarily wait. Did you mean to say Taj Mahal?
Isn't that the Taj Mahal that he scales?
I thought it was the Burj Khalifa.
A Burj Khalifa. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh God, I'm gonna get canceled. Shut
I
this
mean,
camera off.
honestly, I think you just gave Tom Cruise the next idea. But I don't know. Like those two movies to me are just so like every time I've watched them, I've pretty much forgotten about them right after. Plot, everything. Clearly title. I couldn't even name them both, and I've seen them more than once. It's not like I just watched them and then was like, oh yeah, whatever. I won't watch it again. No, I've seen all these movies multiple times. Now I grew up on the first three. Like those are the ones that I kind of came up with. Those were action movies that they're sort of my foundation action films. But when I saw Fallout, like I remember thinking when I finished the movie for the first time, I was like, yeah, this one's gonna stick with me, and it has. I don't see what you said, but I can clearly. I also don't see what you said about Ghost Protocol either. So, I get it, but yeah, I don't know.
Look, there's a charisma vacuum left by the departure of Jeremy Renner. Just nobody's been able to fill that slot since he left. And I just think they need to call it quits.
Oh boy.
Okay, for real, I really like Jeremy Renner. For some reason it's popular to make fun of Jeremy Renner.
I mean,
two-time Academy Award nominee. I know he's Hawkeye in the Avengers. So what? The dude got
the guy had an app.
His life and his kid's life and his family's life taken care of by doing those movies. Cut him a break. He's off doing like really excellent stuff outside of that. Don't get the hate for Jeremy Renner.
When you said cut him a break, was that a pun?
Was what a pun?
Saying cut. After his incident.
You bastard.
You're not the only one, you motherfucker. But I try not to take anything.
A pun?
No, it was just kind of me being a dick. But anyways, we're clearly not taking this show too seriously, but transition.
And neither should you, by the way, the viewer.
People will argue that Mission Impossible 2 does take itself too seriously. And I'm curious, is that a complaint that you have when watching this?
A complaint I don't have is our segue work. Like, wow, just smooth landing.
Professionals, what can we say?
We've been doing this for long enough. I mean, over a year.
Yeah, over a year now.
I think the earnestness is part of the charm, and I'm one of those people that has been really worried about the lack of sincerity in modern blockbusters, just wide release movies in general. I think we're in an age where cynicism or jadedness is more, I don't know, in vogue. Like when you see people making fun of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, it's for the fact that those movies wear their hearts on their sleeves.
Yeah.
I can make jokes about that too. I mean, they're goofy movies for a reason. It's because of the earnestness that the combination of earnestness and genuine good humor that Sam Raimi approached those movies with. Now, Mission Impossible isn't in that camp because it's a little broy. It's again, it's like pretty hung up on how cool it thinks it is. Not a great look, even if you're Tom Cruise.
Right.
Especially if you're Tom Cruise, if you think about it, because he is a man who takes himself way too seriously. In fact, Thandie Newton said about this movie that it was the most stressful experience of her career, and Tom Cruise's behavior, his attitude, was not helping. But
yeah, they said he was really intense, and I get that vibe from him. He's a very.
We don't get that vibe from him.
Yeah.
Look at the image behind me. Look at that man.
Yeah, I don't think he feels anything just a little bit. I don't know if he knows what a little bit means. I think everything is just full on or it's not there. But
that's part of what makes him a great actor. I mean, he will go to the extreme. He will do a motorcycle vault over any in between and land right at the cliff of the extreme. same in his action movie roles, same in his dramatic work. Okay, he is out of 10 all the time, but he has such a natural charisma and such a natural sense of film acting that it lands every time. Every time. Watching him act is like watching stunt work. Watching the end of Magnolia. Have you seen Magnolia?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Watching him act in that is more courageous and more audacious than watching him hang outside of a plane as it's taking off from the tarmac. Like, that's the kind of guy he is. And I've, in case I haven't made it clear, I think Tom Cruise is a giant in this industry. And
ironically,
back when it was cool to hate him, I was actually a big defender of his. Not of his personal life, but I was like, yeah, he's weird, but he's a great actor, right? Like, we can admit that, right? And now I feel like I actually have to remind people that he's a problematic guy, even if he's making movies that we all love. So that's what it's like being a Tom Cruise fan. This movie, like most movies of this era, takes itself too seriously. It thinks it's a little too cool for school, a little too hot to trot, but it is. Like, I think it proves that arrogance. I think it validates its own arrogance a few times. I mean, again, they're doing stuff in this movie that, like, Marvel Studios would CGI the knife. They would CGI the guy holding the knife. They would CGI Tom Cruise.
How about Tom Cruise? So Tom Cruise in all black with a leather and sunglasses, driving a black motorcycle through an explosion. This movie is fucking awesome. I don't care what any of you say. It's fucking awesome. Do you want that to lead to our final verdicts? Do we want to give that? Do you think it's time?
I think, like this movie, we should really wear out our welcome here.
I'm sure the live audience will stick in for all of it.
Yeah, all three of them. I guess that's a loyal audience.
Oh, I love it.
By the way, I'm begging my wife to check in on this. Please, honey.
Oh my God.
Now, final verdicts makes sense. I feel like there's stuff that we're missing, but this is one of those movies that's just filled to the brim with memorable moments.
Yeah.
I will say, again, the criticism of this movie that bothers me the most is that this is John Woo selling out. This is a master of his craft. Just taking the money and running, whatever. Past tense, present tense. I don't give a shit. It's John Woo stops giving a shit, according to people, or forgetting what made him great in the first place. There's a scene in this movie, more like a beat. It's when Thandie Newton first comes to the compound of our villain, pretending to be, interested in renewing their relationship, right? Yeah. And the way he greets her is he grabs her scarf, whisks it off her neck as the winds just rise and rise until it looks like it's going to blow everybody off the ground as Tom Cruise watches on, and the camera gets closer and closer to his face until we see him down to his pimples. Just kidding. Tom Cruise does not have pimples. Scientology does not allow for such imperfections.
Yes. Xenu saves.
My point is, there's no other director on Earth, on planet Earth, working today, working back then, alive or dead, that would take a simple moment like that and turn it into the most operatic, the most over-the-top, most excessive thing. I mean, the sexual tension. Oh my Lord. And this movie doesn't have, it has hints of sex, but the sexuality is just all through the camera work. It is just this this moment in time when directors were still allowed to make their own fucking movies, and they got a master of his craft, and he delivered. I don't really care what people have to say about this movie beyond that. I consider it almost a last hurrah for the great John Woo.
Very fair point. Very fair point. And so I guess after that, it's a good as time as ever to deliver those final verdicts. And so if you're watching the show, if you found us on live and somehow don't know our rating scale, let me go ahead and read it out to you here, like I'm reading off a fucking cue card.
Can you not remember our own rating system?
I know. It's like I have to I don't know why I said read it off. But yes, we have 4 potential ratings that a movie can have on this show. It's either that bad, it's not that bad, it's actually good, or in some cases, actually great. Gabe, I'd like to start with you here. You gave a pretty passionate speech there about this being the last ride of John Woo. But where does that put this movie for you?
Well, puts it in a really interesting place. Something of an awkward place, because
Ooh.
this is not a movie befitting of that stature. This should not have been the movie that hurt John Woo's career to the point where this is really the last thing that people remember from him. This isn't his swan song. It's become his swan song in a way. And I mean, he's done movies since, but I'm talking about in the popular consciousness.
Right. Yeah.
So this movie matters more in that sense. The stakes are higher for me personally, because I don't like to see great directors shunned just because, it's like some awkward choices were made, some choices didn't age well. That's certainly the case for Mission Impossible 2. Did I laugh, like belly laugh, at some of the shots of Tom Cruise bursting out of the flames on his motorcycle like a phoenix from the ashes? Yeah, it's objectively silly. But that doesn't mean it's objectively bad. I think I really treasure something that this movie represents to me, which is a full commitment to entertainment. Like, this movie is trying to deliver, and I think it succeeds in most ways, in the most important ways, the experience of a fully satisfied movie-going experience. We just have movies that are too lean, that are too timid to reach for the heights that this movie did in style. In terms of substance, that's a different story. It's dumber in some ways. It's more thematically interesting to me, honestly, in some other ways. And I want to say it balances out to a movie that I've accepted, I've embraced wholeheartedly. And technically, it is the worst Mission Impossible movie. It is my least favorite Mission Impossible movie, I think. But I said this earlier on social media, and I'll say it again. Being the worst Mission Impossible movie is like being the poorest member of the 1%. I think it's doing just fine. It is doing damn well for itself. And with that long-winded explanation, with that justification, whatever. Mission Impossible 2, it ain't bad. In fact, it's actually good. It's actually freaking cool.
It's freaking sweet, man.
Bruh, it's so cool, bruh. Like, did you see that scene where like Tom Cruise is like, he does a wheelie, bruh, and then he shoots the guys? Bruh, did you not see that scene?
Well, on that note, you talked about embracing this movie wholeheartedly. And I want to say, I think I've done more than that, to be honest with you. This movie, I've said it a few times, is fucking awesome. I love almost everything about this. I think where many call it the black sheep of the Mission Impossible franchise, I look at this more like even though they're very different types of movies, I look at this in a very similar way that I look at Halloween 3. Is it different? Yeah. Does it change a lot? Yes. But is it awesome? Yes, it is. You talked about this movie being your least favorite in the franchise, and I don't think that's something that's uncommon to hear from people. Some people, think it's terrible. Some people think it's still good, but it's just their least favorite. I'm happy to be the contrarian to that. This is actually my second favorite Mission Impossible movie behind Fallout. I love this. I will never get enough of this. And now that I've finally rewatched it, this will become a regular rewatch for me again. This made me feel all sorts of happy. I had all sorts of amounts of fun watching this. This has problems. I think there are moments where taking itself too seriously can be a detriment to the point where you're quite literally laughing at the screen. And there are some moments that are a bit excessive. But so much of that plays into this movie and the charm that it has and the reason that I love it so much that I can't reasonably give this movie any lower than an actually great. I love this. And I think it needs some more attention in a positive light. So happy that our show.
I was hoping you would go that route. I was actually hoping that you would go that route. See, it's interesting because there are movies that you root for. Even you root for them beyond how much you personally like them. It's a rare thing when it happens, but let me tell you, I want to see this movie reevaluated. And I would rather see it loved than hated. And I think it's coming out of the shadows a little bit. I know there was a large online discussion about the Mission Impossible movies before Dead Reckoning came out, and I saw more defenders of MI2 than ever before. It's just one of those things, right? Where like, this is the way nostalgia works. Okay. There's when you first experience it. Then there's a few years later, that's cringe,
Yeah.
And then a few years after that, it's nostalgic. I'm not saying nostalgia is the only factor, but we can't discount it. It's just the relationship we have to media that we grow up with. It's a different type of thing than watching a movie from before your time. And most people have either seen it in the theater or grown up with it like we did. Like, it is almost as old as we were, or we are. So
we were. Are we dead?
We were. I might be after this episode.
I don't think I'm alive right now, to be honest with you.
Certainly the not that bad drinking game has backfired, and by backfired I mean done exactly the thing I was hoping it would do.
Yeah, I'm like Weekend at Bernie's, but I come alive when the camera comes on. So, and it right now it's barely there. This is a movie that I think everybody should be rooting for. I'm hoping that it has more of a resurgence. I think there are some movies that just have this quality about them that, in a weird way, its lack of staying power makes it have more staying power. I think this has the potential to be one of those movies. I think one example is like the Scooby-Doo movies from when we were growing up. Those are very dated. I mean, Sugar fucking Ray is in that movie. But as people get older, they're realizing how great it is. And I actually read a Letterboxd review that was very similar to what you said there. They were like, 6-year-old me, this movie's fucking awesome. Teenage
I saw that
me,
same review.
This sucks. It's cringe. And then 30-year-old me, this is fucking awesome.
Honestly, I don't know why I keep going back to this comparison, but I do feel like it's appropriate. That's the same experience that a lot of people had with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. Even you yourself, isn't that basically your experience?
Yes, because for years I completely discounted those movies because when I was in my teenage years, I hit that cringe point. And that for me is a real turning point in movies, because if I reach that point, it's really hard to get me back out. I start by hating a lot of movies that I end up loving, like Rob Zombie's
Halloween. Our first live stream, or Rob Zombie's Halloween too.
Yeah, or our first live stream. That's a perfect example. Halloween Ends. I hated that movie when it first came. It was the bottom of my ranking, but it's now rising. And if I watch it again, it's probably going to go even higher. So that happens. But if I reach a point where I feel a movie is cringeworthy, it's very hard for me to break out of that. And so the Spider-Man movies are exactly what you described there. When I was a teenager, man, those were not cool to me. Those were the complete opposite.
No, they're not cool. And that's like what I want to champion is not.
I think that's what makes them cool.
Yeah. Well, so when I was growing up, the definition of cool to me would be not caring what other people think. I feel like that has gotten lost. I feel like today's generation, like I'm a baby boomer or something.
These
but
fucking kids
a
today.
person younger than us might have a different definition of cool. I don't know. I might relate to social media engagement or anything like that. But that's what movies like this almost represent. Like, it's trying to be cool. You know what it is? This movie is not afraid to look stupid.
Absolutely.
I think that's the kindest way to put it. Like, I think that John Woo does not care that you think that he's a little much with the doves, with the slow-mo, with the close-ups. Tom Cruise does not give a shit if you think, that this hairstyle ain't working, or any of these, any of the complaints from us plebs. These are like giants doing what they do best. And that's the energy that, you know what? I'm going to change my ranking. I'm going to change my rating right now. Wow. This movie's actually great. This movie's actually fantastic.
That is not how I expected this episode to end, and I love it.
See, here's the thing, right? If I'd seen this movie in 2000, I would say it's actually good, right? I would hear the complaints from people and say, what are you guys talking about? This movie's really good. But juxtaposing it with like where movies are right now, like, honestly, the best action movies that come out, I would rather watch Mission Impossible 2 than those.
I would agree 100%.
What a weird realization, right? But it's the God's honest truth. And maybe that's nostalgia, I'm not sure. But
a little bit, at least. It's there.
What is there, right? Other than two men trying to justify their love for a movie where Tom Cruise pole vaults off of a motorcycle into another man pole vaulting off of his motorcycle.
Which, by the way, causes a mid-air motorcycle explosion. And I don't think a movie like that deserves anything less than an actually great. And so, folks, thank you for joining us on Not That Bad Live 2. This is our second ever live stream. We had a lot of fun talking about MI2. Yeah, I think we had a blast here. If you had fun with us, you can check out our website, notthatbadpod.com, where we got links to all of our social media pages, or maybe you'd like to type in the names, which are listed at the bottom of the screen here on any of your favorite platforms. Maybe you want to head over to our Patreon. Give us a little bit of extra support. Patreon.com/notthatbad. You can contribute at any tier, even our lowest tier, and you can get any of our monthly specials. We like to have fun, do different things for those specials. Our most recent specials included somebody who's been in the chat, and I've appreciated them watching the show today. Austin from SPC Unleashed joined me to talk about WWE Studios movies, which was a lot of fun. He had a lot of fun doing it, and who knows what's coming next. Gabe, what else would you like to say before we take this thing out?
Well, I'm happy to announce that if you guys liked this live stream, if you want to see more live streams from us in the future, guess what? Yeah. We are going to be doing this bi-weekly. That's right. We are now putting out content on a weekly basis. We are doing a pre-recorded episode, our usual type of episode, bi-weekly every other Thursday. And then between those Thursdays, we're doing a live stream. So if you're tired of us, if you're getting sick of hearing us talk, well, guess what, baby? We're doing the opposite of shutting up. We're just getting louder. Okay.
Yes, we are. Absolutely. We're going to get so loud, it's going to be insane.
It's probably a bad idea, but we've said it here in the live stream and we can't back down.
I'm not ready to do it. So I'm not ready to back down. I mean, so yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're ready for that. I'm excited to do the weekly content thing. And I hope people are excited to see it. And so, yeah, I think that takes us to the end of our show. Mr. Tice, you are an expert at taking us out. So why don't you lead us to the end of our program?
Oh boy.
Take a drink every time Gabe outros the show.
I'm Connor. Wait, no. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It'll come to me in a second. Hold on.
Other Gabe, you're other Gabe.
I'm other Gabe.
I'm other Connor somehow.
You are the Connor, sir. Respect yourself. This
you,
is Not That Bad, a movie podcast, signing out.
Wow.